At 26, Samantha Miller had already learned to swallow her tears in silence. Ever since her mother died when she was still a teenager, the house she grew up in had turned into a field of unilateral orders. Harold Miller, her father, was the kind of man who confused authority with affection. A powerful rancher in Willow Creek, he ran his daughter's life as if she were one of the ranch's prized horses, well-fed, well-dressed, but always kept on a short leash. She never had a choice about what to study, who to go out with, or even what to wear on Sundays. Her name was always tied to decisions that weren't hers. The last straw came on a cloudy April morning when Harold announced that she would marry Richard Blackwell. He didn't ask, he simply stated it, like someone selling off a piece of land. Richard was a well-known investor, 20 years her senior, with cold eyes and a trained smile. Samantha already knew him from formal dinners and meetings about the farm merger. Every time he placed a hand on her shoulder, her stomach turned. The thought of sharing a bed with him felt like a sentence. That night, she lay staring at the ceiling for hours, heart pounding, throat tight. Running away seemed impossible, but staying was worse. The next day, Samantha saw James Cooper for the first time. He stepped out of an old pickup truck with a sack of feed on his shoulder and eyes squinting in the sun. Just another new ranch hand, according to the others. But there was something about his demeanor, calm, steady, like he wasn't in a hurry to prove anything. She watched him from afar for weeks, between tasks and silences. He wasn't much of a talker, but always greeted her with a subtle nod, never intrusive. It wasn't until she tripped over a branch and twisted her ankle near the barn that he ran to her without hesitation. "Are you okay?" he asked, with a sincerity in his eyes that disarmed the wall she'd built around her heart. It was the first time in ages someone seemed to care about how she felt, not just what she represented. Their friendship began in the quiet moments of daily life, a cup of coffee left on the porch, a fence fixed before she even asked, a shared silence as the sky changed colors at the end of the day. James didn't ask questions, but he listened when she spoke, and that, for Samantha, was new. When she told him about the arranged marriage, the tension with her father, and her fear of being forced into a loveless life, James listened without interrupting. "You deserve to choose for yourself," he said, with a steadiness that clashed with the world she grew up in. A few days later, he showed up at the main house with a proposal. A simple marriage, without emotional obligations, just enough to give her the legal freedom she needed. Samantha hesitated. It was madness, but it was also a chance, and she didn't want to spend the rest of her life wondering what could have been if she'd said yes. The wedding took place in a discreet courthouse in a nearby town, with two witnesses who had no idea what they were witnessing. No ring, no dress, no celebration, just a signed paper and two names sealing a silent promise: freedom. Samantha trembled when she left the courthouse, not with regret, but with relief. For the first time, she had done something for herself. Returning to Willow Creek felt like walking through a minefield. Harold found out about the wedding 3 days later, and the explosion was immediate. He broke things, yelled, threatened to disinherit her, and accused James of taking advantage. Richard showed up at the door with a legal notice, trying to annul the marriage on grounds of fraud. In shock, Samantha realized what truly terrified the men around her wasn't the marriage, it was the fact that she had made a decision without asking for permission. She left the house she had lived in her whole life with a small suitcase and a heavy heart. James was waiting by the roadside, next to his pickup truck. He said nothing, just opened the passenger door. The ride to his cabin was quiet, yet comfortable, as if they both knew they were beginning something they couldn't yet name. The cabin was simple, with rustic furniture, the smell of wood and coffee. No luxury, but there was space, and silence, and peace. In the first few days, Samantha slept like she hadn't in years. She woke up to birdsong, helped James with ranch chores, cooked when she wanted, read forgotten books on the shelf. Slowly, The tightness in her chest gave way to a strange lightness. There were no promises between them, but there was respect. James never crossed a line she didn't offer. And in the middle of that calm routine, she started to see him differently, like discovering a shelter that, without warning, starts to feel like home. What began as an agreement gained softer, almost imperceptible contours. James made coffee the way she liked it. Samantha folded his shirts before putting them away. Their conversations, once practical, began to carry shy laughter, memories, bits of the past that they slowly entrusted to each other. It wasn't a sweeping passion, but something more valuable. It was care. One night, during a storm, the power went out. They lit candles, shared soup, and between thunderclaps, James told her about growing up on farms, about a mother who died young, and a distant father. Samantha listened in silence, realizing that despite knowing little about each other, there was a shared pain, a kind of loneliness that can't be explained but is instantly recognized. That night, she rested her head on his shoulder for the first time. He didn't move, he just stayed there, quietly, as if that simple gesture was enough. But the peace didn't last. A month later, Harold had a heart attack. Samantha rushed back to the Miller ranch for the first time since she left and found herself facing a weakened but still proud father. The biggest surprise, however, came that evening when a sleek black car pulled up in front of the house. A man stepped out, dressed in a flawless suit, polished boots, and a face known from agribusiness magazines. William Cooper. He entered without asking, and in front of everyone, called James son. The silence that followed felt almost physical. Samantha felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. James didn't look at her. The revelation hit like a bomb. He wasn't just a ranch hand, he was heir to a rural empire and had never told her. The shock mixed with hurt. Why hide something so big? What else had he kept from her? In the following days, the mood in the cabin shifted. Samantha could barely look James in the eye. Everything they'd built felt unstable, like he had been a stranger all along. "You should have told me," she said, not yelling, not accusing, just with a deep sadness in her voice. James tried to explain. He said he hid his origins because he wanted to be seen for who he truly was, not as a millionaire's son. He wanted to live freely, without the labels the Cooper name carried. But to Samantha, it felt all too familiar. Once again, a man had decided what she could or couldn't know. Once again, someone chose for her. She needed space. She spent a few days in her old bedroom at the main house, caring for her recovering father and enduring Richard's persistent advances, now with a new pitch. That he wanted to protect her from James, from the scheme, from the supposed manipulation. In the midst of this turmoil, Samantha learned about a new will drafted by Harold after his first heart attack. In it, full control of the Miller Ranch was transferred to her name with complete legal authority. Harold didn't say much about his reasons, but there was a tiredness in his face, a kind of late admission of guilt. "You're stronger than I thought, Sam," he said, holding her hand with frail fingers. When Richard found out, he lost it. He called in lawyers, threatened to take the case to court, and tried to annul the marriage, claiming Samantha had been emotionally manipulated. But she was no longer the silent woman she used to be. She asked him to leave the house. For the first time, she was in control of her life, her land, and her name. But the decision about her marriage to James still hurt like an open wound. The tension reached its peak in the local courthouse, where Richard made one last attempt to annul the marriage, citing bad faith and concealment of identity. But the judge wasn't moved. Samantha, resolute, told her side of the story clearly. She didn't hide her anger at James or how betrayed she felt. But she also said that, unlike Richard, James had never tried to buy her, never decided for her, never treated her like a bargaining chip. She left the hearing relieved, but exhausted. On the way back, she received a short message from James. "If you want to come back, the door is open. But if you don't, I'll understand." She stared at the screen for hours, remembering the simple days, the calm she felt beside him, the silent nights that said more than 1,000 words. Samantha didn't return to the cabin until the end of that week. She found it clean, the fireplace lit, and the smell of fresh bread in the air. James was sitting on the porch, with the same calm demeanor as always. She sat beside him without saying anything for a while. Then she took a deep breath and said, "I don't need a hero, James. Just someone who'll walk beside me without lies." He nodded slowly, eyes wet, not trying to defend himself. That night they made no promises. They didn't need to. What existed between them now wasn't convenience or obligation, it was choice, free, conscious, mature. Samantha's story wasn't a fairy tale. It was made of pain, courage, and new beginnings. And finally, she had what she had longed for, to own herself. And by choice, and only by choice, to share that path with someone who saw her exactly as she was.